My name is Matt. I am a VP Product and Operations, basically how we run the company at Roblox, which has a big community. Before this, I was also president and head of operations for Crunchbase, which also had a large community. I'm going to talk a little bit about Roblox here today, but if people have questions about either one of them, I am happy to answer. So let's get started. Sorry, adjust my screen again. So for anybody who's not familiar with Roblox, it's a gaming platform predominantly used by kids. And it's a platform where people create content. They create these experiences. Some are very much like a game. Some of them are more like hangout social experiences. And then other people come and enjoy that. And so it's your classic two-sided marketplace. We have content creators who are incentivized by more users. And the more content there is, the more users there is. And it's this virtuous circle that's been going on for quite some time now. Oops, back to my screen here. So if you look at Roblox today, there's about 150 million monthly users. About a third of those people, a third to a quarter of those people show up every day. We have 5 million developers. So these are people creating content. And there's about 10 million experiences on the platform. There's also tons of content for your avatar in these virtual worlds and stuff like that. So when we talk about developers, it's not just people building games, but it's also people building virtual items that they can buy and sell amongst each other. And one thing that's important to understand about Roblox is that it is a marketplace, and the people who are creating content can sell that content through a microtransaction system. We have our own virtual currency that powers everything. And because of that, there's actually big businesses that run on Roblox. So the question is who is this developer community? Our objective is to grow the community and get more and more people to create content, because we have this, virtual two-sided marketplace that we want to drive. And there are 5 million active developers and creators. We use the words interchangeably. Sometimes we use the word creator to talk about people who create virtual items for avatars, whereas developers are really building games. But it's super diverse out there. There's also people who build infrastructure and sell it to other developers to use in their games. So there's all kinds of stuff going on. The thing is, in that 5 million, there are kids, junior high, think, hey, you know what? I really want to experiment with building, I'm really into fashion. I'm going to build virtual clothing, and I'm going to become a designer. There's that. And then there's developers who are making tens of millions of dollars a year. And there's everything in between. And what's interesting is that most of the very successful developers on Roblox, the ones who are earning a lot of money, began as the kids experimenting with, wouldn't it be fun to drop a tank in a desert and see what it does when I drive the tank around? Or wouldn't it be fun to create this virtual outfit? I wonder if I could try and sell it, or maybe it's just fun. And so we have this community out there that is incredibly diverse, and we need to figure out what to do with them. And they're all part of this developer community that we have. So, excuse me. One of the things that we've done is we've really started thinking about the developer community as a funnel. And at the bottom of the funnel, you have what we call studios. So members of the community who, some of them now have staffs of 50 to 100 people who are helping them build content. And then at the top of the funnel, you've got everybody, and you have people dabbling. And I should note that dabbling also includes summer camps. There's lots of summer camps that use Roblox for their curriculum. So we created this funnel here that starts with what we call active developers. And we're going to focus here on people who are creating experiences. But with an active developer, it's anybody who creates something that can get at least one other person to enjoy their content. Because if you get one other person to enjoy your content, you've kind of started getting that feedback loop. And then we have the experienced developers. And they're the ones who, from a metric standpoint, they're getting 500 other people to enjoy their content. And we say experienced because at that point, you've probably learned scripting, you've learned how to use some of the APIs, and you kind of get what it takes to do this. And then you have advanced developers. And they're the ones who are starting to be like, you know what, like, yeah, like I could probably figure out how to make a little bit of money. Maybe I'm doing something new. I'm not just, copying what other people have done. And then you get into the part-time developers. And in the part-time developers, we start looking at people who are making $500 or more per month. And this is in, real life, real world fiat currency. And with a part-time developers, our presumption is if you're making $500 or more a month, there's this nagging suspicion in the back of your head that like, this could be my job. Like if I'm making 500 now, like I could probably make a lot more in the future. And then we get to sustainable developers. And these are where we actually get people who are like, this is their career. And this is starting to be like, oh, at $5,000 a month, yeah, I am going to quit my job and I'm going to do this full time. And then you get to our top developers or our studios, and they're the ones who are like, actually, their problem is how do I go build an entire team to help me build stuff? And you know what? That team probably comes from this community too, because if I want to hire experienced developers, I'm going to go back to the community in order to find it. So we've created this funnel, and then we think, excuse me, about what we're going to do to support people in the funnel. And so we've created lots of different programs. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about these programs that we've done. When we look at the active and experienced developers, this is where, there are millions. And, one-on-one connections with them is really hard. So you start with just a lot of material to help them help themselves. And so it's a lot of tutorials. We do a ton of stuff around enabling schools, summer camps, other things like that in order to be our extension to help build things or help teach people stuff. And then we do events. And we do events where we'll put challenges out in the community, and they're just fun. And there's just like saying like, hey, you know what? Like, here's this challenge. See if you can build something. We'll promote it on social media. We'll promote the people who build great stuff on social media. And it gets recognition, but it's a chance for the community to leverage the community and to attract more people into it. And as soon as you get experienced and we notice that there's a little bit of stuff going on there, and you get some recognition of what's going on. And a lot of times that recognition comes from other much more experienced developers in the community who tell us like, hey, here are people who are up and coming. We actually create our own accelerator and incubator program. So whatever you think about like venture and how they do accelerators and incubators, we do essentially the same thing. And we'll bring them to California, to San Mateo, at least pre-COVID. We would bring them here and we would say, here's our deal. You don't have to pay us. We will give you office space and we will let you talk to everybody who's working at Roblox full time. If you've got a great idea that you're already working on, great, take it. If you're struggling to find an idea, we'll help you. And that's what we call incubation. And with that, a lot of what we're doing is actually we're forming social connections with these people in the community. Because one thing that's really hard with building content on Roblox or building a game anywhere is it takes a lot of work. And a lot of times you have to collaborate and you have to find partners. And when you start with a community that's widely distributed, that's all over the place, and it's predominantly kids at the beginning, you have to find ways for people to make connections. So our accelerator and incubator programs are ways of doing that. So next, we have like our advanced developers and part-time developers. Here we start saying, okay, you know what? This is a real like B2B community. These are people who are starting to make money. There are people who are like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this is my real job. And you really have to change the way in which you treat them and the way you approach it. So what we do is we have formal processes for like reporting bugs and for getting help from our engineering staff. We also build incentive programs because a lot of times we want to like steer people towards the types of content or the types of activities we want them to do. Because a lot of times they don't know. It's like, I stumbled into this was fun, but I may not know that if I just changed a little bit of what I'm doing, I could be super successful. So we create incentive programs that help guide people towards, places where maybe they can accelerate a little bit more. We also hold conferences. And with conferences, it's about like forming those social connections. But in these conferences, we really do a fair amount of curating to get the right people there. And we'll invite people from all over the world. This summer was the first time we did it fully virtual. We're talking about really like spreading that around, which is actually really good for us because we have to support lots of different languages and other stuff like that, and just different actually, it's hard to get somebody from like Indonesia to fly to San Mateo for a developer conference for Roblox. But if we can make them global and we make them all virtual, that really helps. So moving on, you get to like the bottom of the funnel. And here is where these are businesses that are live and they're running. And here's where we start moving into more of like, almost like a consulting business, where we say, all right, you've already been really successful. You've gotten all of these people, but you know what? Like maybe we can help you with game design. The most interesting one we did was a game called Adopt Me. It's probably, or it is one of the top video games ever made in the world. It was built on Roblox. And about a year and a half ago, and probably a year and a half, 2 years ago, it was a small team of people who were kind of hobbyists. They were very talented. And we had them work with one of our game designers, and it turned into one of the top games in the world. And sometimes what it means is just like providing like real hands-on guidance. Like, I'm not going to give you a tutorial. I'm not going to make you watch a video. I'm actually going to sit down with you, and it's all free, and you're just part of the community, and we really want to help. But even when we do that, like one of the things that we've learned is that you have to find teams or individuals who are ready to accept the help. It's one thing to put a bunch of videos out there and hope that everybody clicks on it and stuff. But like at this stage, what you're really looking for is you're kind of like a venture firm. You're looking for a team that's ready to accept a little bit of guidance and really open to like different ideas and like ready to accelerate. And so we do that through this consulting. We also help them with operating their game. These types of games and experiences, it's not where you publish it one day and then you sit back for a month or so and you watch everything take off. You're actually running it every day. You're holding events, you're changing the content, you're operating on social media, you're doing all of that stuff. And again, this is something where like it's very hard to get that across in a tutorial or an instruction manual. You really need somebody who's going to sit down with you and just mentor you on a day-to-day basis. So we provide that. And we also start really getting into advanced analytics, where we will provide and pay for super sophisticated analytics for them to help them really understand what's going on. And again, like, we'll pay for that and we'll set everything up for them and all, because if they can understand more about their audience, they will build better content, and obviously that will help us. Back to my screen here. One other thing that we do think a lot about is when you're building these global communities, a lot of times in these B2B situations, you're looking at people who are running businesses, and you're talking about like how many people they employ and all of these things like that. One of the sort of a revelation for us over the last couple of years is to start getting into what we call GDP adjusted measures of how well they're doing. And when we look at that, and it was eye-opening, because what we found was there were a lot of people who were creating content on the platform who, like, from a GDP adjusted income perspective, they were already building studios. They were already hiring a lot of people. And sometimes when we're sitting here in California, we're thinking about cost of living here and whatnot, we forget about that. And it has changed our view of where we run programs, because on the platform, it's a lot easier to get somebody to like a GDP adjusted $100,000 a year if they're in the Philippines or if they're in Indonesia. And so then you start thinking about like, well, okay, how do you tailor programs? How do you tailor content that we create to try and reach markets where individuals can become successful much more quickly, and they can start building out these studios and they can create much richer content? So you start taking like a very global view in like how you manage these things. I think that was all I've got, but I'm happy to take any questions that anybody has.
Yeah, let's take 2 or 3.
I'm sharing on that.
Yeah, it's amazing. Thank you so much for that. One of the commonalities I always see with community is how high touch it is. And very high touch, especially when it goes to the most lucrative kind of creators. But then if you flip it, what do you do about the low quality content? How do you handle that?
I mean, low quality content that shows up on the platform.
Yeah.
You manage that through search and discovery, right? Like, you know, we have discovery systems and recommendation systems and whatnot that, like, for the average user, they're going to get recommended like the highest quality content. But something to remember in like in managing this is that most of our, like I said, most of our top developers began as kids, and it's really interesting in like, because this, I mean, is very much a business at the high end. At the low end, you think about ROI for developers. At the, you know, and I say low end is like the novice developers. Their ROI is doing something that their friend experiences. Like that is the aha moment. It's like, I created something, my friend saw it and they said it was cool. And when you talk about like, you know, the 10,000 hours notion to develop expertise and all of that stuff, our 10,000 hours happens amongst friends. So while like we, you know, for the average user, and we have lots more, you know, consumers than we have creators, for the average consumer, we do push the highest quality content, but you can't forget about people who are just starting off and just learning, because it's chances are they're sitting in a classroom right next to each other and they're chatting about it, and this is what's fun for them.
Thank you.
Matt, I have a question. This is Mario. I have a question.
Yeah.
So you talked a little bit about, you know, the different benefits for creators and developers within the community, but you didn't really talk about like how Roblox got started. Like what aspect of the community did they start first? I'm curious, since there's so much going on, where did they start to be able to build and add on those additional features later?
Yeah, actually, Roblox is hyper iterative. It's been around for 16 years. And the first community, there was no monetization, and there was equal, like all the creators were players as well. And it began with people like kids who basically just wanted to share stuff with their friends. It was very much a sharing thing. And over time, the tools became more sophisticated. People have started investing a lot more and got much more talented, and monetization was introduced. And when monetization was introduced, that's when you really started seeing the spread between more consumers and like the consumer to creator ratio. That's where it started to diverge. Because at that point, you had creators really investing enough time to make something amazing, and that was attracting a lot more users. One of the things, you know, like I've been thinking a lot about lately, just like in product, is like the and like you look at some of these businesses that have grown over time, it's a lot like cooking, right? Like everybody can agree on the raw ingredients, and like it totally makes sense, but the way in which you mix them together and the amount of time that you let it kind of bake and sit matters a whole lot. And I think, you know, Roblox was very fortunate in being able to take a very long view on the community and just let it grow. So at the time when Roblox really took off, the top developers had already been playing around with Roblox probably for 7 to 10 years. And that, you know, it's hard to like, you know, like when you think about like how do you recreate that, it's a challenge, because, you know, a 7 to 10 year runway to really build that community is a pretty long time. But it's what happened. It's the answer.
Gabe raised his hand. So Gabe, go ahead and ask your question, and then we got to move on. I think you got to go on unmute.
How about that?
Okay, perfect.
Riffing on the monetization stuff, I know that if you monetize stuff and it's too little of a reward, it starts feeling like it's de-incentivizing. Like, I wanted to share this with my friend and you're offering me 3 cents. Like,
Yeah.
is there a line where you basically don't monetize at all, or how are you managing that sort of de-incentivization part of it?
Yeah, actually, that's a really good question. So, so the way you make money on Roblox is through microtransactions. At least that's how it's traditionally been. You create something in your game, you say, hey, you want to go to the next level, you need to pay some number of Robux, which is the currency, you get to the next level, or we give our developers a cut of that transaction. One of the things that we realized was that developers were, before you could get good at monetization, you had to get good at creating content. And you had this problem where you would be like talking to developers and they'd be like just slaving over creating content and they wouldn't have that reward mechanism of earning any money. And if they started trying to get into into monetizing too soon, they wouldn't have the content that really worked. And so it's this chicken and egg problem. So what we did was we created something called engagement-based payouts. And we basically said, we have a whole subscription engine. We're going to take our subscription revenue and we're basically going to divide it up pro rata amongst where people spend time in games. So if you have a game, you have no monetization mechanisms in the game, don't worry about it. We'll just pay you based on people spending time there. It's in theory similar to how Spotify pays musicians. So we did that. And one of the things we did is we said, you know what, like, we're just going to pay everybody. If you get money, if you get 1 Robux, which is about a penny, we're just going to give it to you. And part of the reason we did that is because we know that a lot of developers who are not making a ton of money, they take that virtual currency and they just spend it back in the game. So we know that, like, if we send it out there, they're just going to spend it back. What we didn't realize was the social media impact of it. When suddenly, like, Twitter would light up with these kids who would be like, I just earned $1 on Robux. Or they wouldn't even say how much they earned. It's just like, I just earned money. Like, I'm actually creating content. People are paying me for my content. And there was this huge social reward system happening there where people felt like, wow, like, I'm being recognized and like I'm getting something back. And even if they were just going to go spend that money right back on the platform. So we actually found that it was a huge incentive to kind of spread the word about what was going on. And we didn't see issues where people were frustrated.